My best friend asked me to be his best man at his wedding. He loved his fiancée, worshipped her. But 2 weeks before the ceremony, I accidentally saw her at a restaurant, sitting on another man's lap. Instead of telling him everything right away, I prepared a special surprise for her. Josh and I had been friends since we were kids running around the suburban streets of Arlington, Virginia. He was that rare kind of person who always kept his word, no matter what. The type who drive across 3 states at 2 a.m. if you needed help, then wave off your thanks like it was nothing. I'd lost count of how many times he'd been there for me, through my parents' divorce, when I lost my job during the recession, even that embarrassing incident with my ex that we never talk about. Josh always put others before himself, and sometimes I worried the world would take advantage of his kindness. When he met Lauren at a mutual friend's barbecue last summer, I saw something change in him. She's different, he told me that night, his eyes bright with that look people get when they know they've found something special. She gets me, you know. I nodded, but something in my gut twisted. Maybe it was the way Lauren's smile never quite reached her eyes, or how she'd check her phone when Josh wasn't looking. But who was I to question it? Josh was happier than I'd ever seen him. 4 months later, he showed me the ring. It was his grandmother's, a delicate Art Deco piece with a story behind every diamond. "You think she'll like it?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I assured him she would, and when Lauren said yes a week later, her Instagram post about finding her soulmate got over 1,000 likes. The wedding planning consumed them both. Josh threw himself into every detail, wanting everything to be perfect for Lauren. She had specific ideas about everything. The venue had to be the Fairfax Garden Hotel, the flowers had to be white peonies with just a hint of blush, the cake needed to be from that boutique bakery in Georgetown that had a 2-year waiting list. Josh made it all happen, even taking on extra consulting work to cover the mounting costs. I noticed how Lauren's demands kept escalating, but Josh just smiled. "She deserves the best," he'd say, and I'd bite my tongue. Something about her had always felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The way she'd sometimes talk about Josh's modest teaching salary when she thought he couldn't hear, or how she'd joke about trading up his reliable Honda for something more suitable for their image. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was having dinner at Matteo's, this little Italian place in Old Town. I wasn't even supposed to be there, my date had cancelled at the last minute, but I decided to keep the reservation. That's when I saw a familiar silhouette in a corner booth. Lauren. But she wasn't alone, and she definitely wasn't sitting like a woman engaged to my best friend should sit. The man she was with had his arms wrapped around her waist, and she was practically melting into him. I recognized that look on her face. It was the same one she wore when Josh proposed, only this time it seemed real. My hands shook as I discreetly took out my phone and captured several photos. I didn't confront them. Didn't cause a scene. This wasn't my battle, yet. The next morning, I skipped work and started digging. It didn't take long to identify her companion, Mark Thatcher, her perfect ex from before Josh. They'd dated for 2 years until he took a job in Seattle. Lauren had told Josh it was ancient history, that she'd found herself after Mark left. What she hadn't mentioned was their ongoing text conversations, or their meetups whenever he was in town. I knew Josh wouldn't believe me without concrete proof. He'd need more than just photos that Lauren could explain away as just catching up with an old friend. And I couldn't simply walk up to him and say, "Hey, your fiancé is cheating." He'd defend her, and she'd turn him against me. I'd seen it happen before with other friends. So I decided to play the long game. Lauren's perfect wedding was a carefully orchestrated production, with every moment planned for maximum social media impact. The wedding planner, Jessica, had worked with several local influencers, and Lauren made sure everyone knew it. That's who I approached first. "I want to create something special for the reception," I told Jessica over coffee at a quiet cafe in Georgetown. "A surprise video tribute to the happy couple." She loved the idea, especially when I mentioned being willing to cover the extra costs for the high-end projection equipment. We spent an hour discussing technical details, screen placement, and timing. All the while, she had no idea what I was really planning. The next few days, I gathered more evidence. It wasn't hard. Lauren and Mark had grown careless. They met 3 more times before the wedding, always at out-of-the-way places, but never quite hidden enough. I documented everything. The lingering touches at a wine bar in Bethesda. The intimate dinner at a secluded restaurant in Falls Church. The way they kissed goodbye in the parking lot of the Tysons Corner Mall, thinking no one was watching. Meanwhile, I played my part perfectly. I helped Josh with last-minute wedding details, attended the rehearsal dinner, and gave a touching speech about true love and loyalty. Lauren even hugged me afterward, whispering, "Josh is so lucky to have a friend like you." The irony made my stomach turn. I spent hours editing the video, making sure the transition would be perfect. The first part was exactly what everyone would expect, photos of Josh and Lauren's relationship set to their favorite song. Their first date at the National Harbor, the weekend trip to Virginia Beach, the engagement party at her parents' house in McLean. Lauren had carefully curated these moments for social media, and now they would serve a different purpose. The bachelor party was 2 nights before the wedding. We kept it low-key at Josh's insistence, just a few beers at our favorite bar in Arlington. He couldn't stop talking about Lauren, about their future together, about the house they were looking at in Vienna. Each word felt like a knife in my gut, knowing what I knew. "You're a good friend," he told me as I dropped him off that night. "I couldn't have made it through all this wedding stress without you." I almost told him everything right then. Almost showed him the photos. Almost warned him about what was coming. But I knew he needed to see it for himself. Needed everyone to see it. The wedding day arrived bright and clear. The Fairfax Garden Hotel looked like something out of a fairy tale, with white peonies and crystal decorations catching the morning light. The ceremony was in the grand ballroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. Lauren had chosen a designer dress that probably cost more than Josh's annual salary. She looked perfect, practiced, as she walked down the aisle. I stood next to Josh at the altar, the weight of the USB drive in my pocket feeling like a bomb waiting to go off. He was beaming, his eyes never leaving Lauren as she approached. The minister spoke about trust and devotion, about the sacred bonds of marriage, about honesty and fidelity. Lauren didn't even flinch. She was good, I had to give her that. They exchanged vows, Lauren's carefully written to sound spontaneous and heartfelt, Josh's simple and sincere. When they kissed, the crowd applauded, and Lauren made sure to turn for the photographers to capture her best angle. Everything was going according to her plan. Almost everything. The reception began at sunset. Round tables filled the garden terrace, each one decorated with more peonies and floating candles. Lauren had insisted on a string quartet for dinner, another detail designed to impress her social media followers. The champagne flowed, the guests laughed, and the newlyweds made their rounds, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. I waited until after the first dance, after the father-daughter dance, after the toasts. Waited until Lauren had relaxed, probably thinking she'd pulled it off. That's when I nodded to Jessica, who cued the AV team. The lights dimmed right on cue. The massive screen we'd installed at the far end of the terrace came to life, and the opening notes of Lauren and Josh's song filled the air. There were appreciative murmurs from the guests as the first images appeared, Josh and Lauren at National Harbor, silhouetted against the sunset. Lauren's carefully curated Instagram moments played out one by one, each one accompanied by her own captions about true love and destiny. I watched Lauren's face as she sat at the head table, her hand intertwined with Josh's. She was smiling that practiced smile of hers, probably already thinking about how many likes the professional photos would get. The video continued, showing their engagement photos, the ring reveal, the shower. All the greatest hits of their supposed love story. Then the music changed. Subtly at first, a minor key where there should have been major, a discordant note that made Lauren's head tilt slightly. The images began to change too. A photo of the Matteo's Italian restaurant sign. A shot of Lauren's car in the parking lot. And then, the first photo of her with Mark hit the screen like a thunderbolt. Lauren, sitting on his lap in that corner booth, his hands on her waist, their faces close enough to kiss. The timestamp clearly visible, 2 weeks ago. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Someone gasped. Lauren's mother dropped her champagne glass. But I wasn't done. The next series of photos played out in merciless succession. Lauren and Mark at the wine bar in Bethesda, their hands intertwined across the table. The two of them emerging from the Falls Church restaurant, her lipstick smudged. The kiss in the Tyson's Corner parking lot, caught in perfect, damning detail. Turn it off. Lauren's voice cracked through the silence. This is fake. I stood up slowly, making sure every eye in the place could see me. No, Lauren. It's not fake. And you know it. The terrace had gone completely silent except for the soft background music still playing from the video. 250 guests sat frozen, watching the drama unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Lauren's perfect French twist was coming undone as she shook her head frantically. Josh, she turned to him, reaching for his arm. Baby, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. Mark is just. Just what? Josh's voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent terrace. Just the ex you told me was ancient history. Just someone you happened to run into. Just the guy you've been seeing behind my back. No. I mean, it was just a few times. It didn't mean anything. I was nervous about the wedding, and he was in town, and... She was babbling now, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Josh stood up. The movement was so sudden that his chair fell backward with a crash that made everyone jump. He looked at Lauren for a long moment, and I saw the exact second when the last of his trust in her died. You know what the worst part is, he said, his voice still eerily calm. I would have forgiven you if you'd just been honest. If you'd told me you had doubts, if you'd said you weren't sure. But this? He gestured at the screen, where the images were still cycling through her betrayal in high definition. This shows exactly who you are. He turned and walked away. Not running, not storming off, just walking with quiet dignity through the shocked crowd. Lauren tried to follow him, but her designer heels caught in the terrace decking. She stumbled, catching herself on a nearby table and sending a centerpiece crashing to the ground. Josh! Wait! Please! But he was already gone. The guests sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then, like a dam breaking, the whispers started. Lauren's mother was crying. Her father was arguing with Mark's parents, who had been invited to the wedding at Lauren's insistence, another detail that suddenly made much more sense. And Mark? He was nowhere to be seen. He'd slipped away in the chaos, leaving Lauren to face the consequences alone. Later, we'd learned that he'd blocked her number and taken a job offer in London. Apparently, he wasn't interested in dealing with the fallout of their perfect romance. The next few weeks were a blur of damage control. Josh's family handled the venue charges and vendor cancellations with quiet efficiency. Lauren's parents, perhaps trying to salvage some dignity, offered to reimburse everyone, but the damage to their reputation in McLean's social circles was already done. The video had been recorded by several guests on their phones, and while no one posted it publicly out of respect for Josh, the story spread through Washington's upper-middle-class suburbs like wildfire. Lauren tried everything to fix things. She sent Josh heartfelt letters that were returned unopened. She tried to corner him after his classes at the high school where he taught, but the administration, having heard the story, had her escorted off the property. She even showed up at his parents' house in tears, but they quietly closed the door in her face. Her carefully curated social media presence disappeared overnight, all accounts set to private, then deleted entirely. I didn't see Josh for almost a month after the wedding. Then one evening, he showed up at my door with a six-pack of beer and a tired smile. "I'm not sure whether to punch you or hug you," he said as I let him in. We sat on my balcony, watching the planes approach Reagan National Airport in the distance. The October air was getting crisp, and leaves were starting to turn along the Potomac. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" he finally asked. I took a long pull from my beer before answering. "Would you have believed me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Probably not," he admitted. I was pretty blind when it came to her." "You weren't blind," I said. "You were just being who you are, someone who sees the best in people, who gives them the benefit of the doubt. That's not a bad thing, Josh." He nodded slowly, then asked the question I'd been dreading: was it worth it? Creating that whole spectacle. I thought about Lauren's face when the photos appeared, about the gasps from the crowd, about the satisfying crash of her perfect facade crumbling. I'd thought revenge would taste sweeter, but instead, it left a complex aftertaste, part satisfaction, part guilt, part something I couldn't quite name. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But you deserved to know the truth, and she deserved to face it publicly after all her lies." We sat in silence for a while after that, watching the sky turn purple over the city. Something had changed between us, not broken, exactly, but shifted. I'd shown him a side of myself he hadn't seen before, a capacity for calculated vengeance that didn't quite fit with his image of his easygoing best friend. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. "I heard she's moving to Chicago," he said. "Fresh start, apparently." I nodded, not sure what to say. "You know what's strange," he continued. "Sometimes I catch myself missing her. Not the real her, I don't think I ever knew that person. But the her I thought she was." He shook his head. "Is that crazy?" "No," I said. "I don't think that's crazy at all." After he left, I stood on the balcony for a long time, thinking about love and loyalty, truth and lies, revenge and redemption. I'd protected my best friend, exposed a liar, and delivered justice in grand fashion. I should have felt like a hero. Instead, I felt complicated. Maybe because I'd glimpsed something in myself during those 2 weeks of plotting, a talent for deception and manipulation that wasn't so different from Lauren's. Or maybe because the line between justice and vengeance was blurrier than I'd thought. The last I heard, Lauren did move to Chicago. She's working at a marketing firm there, rebuilding her life far from the whispers and sideways glances of Northern Virginia. Josh started dating again recently, a kindergarten teacher who seems genuinely kind. And me? I'm still trying to decide if I did the right thing, or just the satisfying thing. Sometimes late at night, I find myself wondering, if Lauren's secret had been less dramatic, if she'd just been having doubts or cold feet, would I have orchestrated her public destruction with the same righteous certainty? The answer to that question keeps me awake more often than I'd like to admit.